Hello, and welcome to a very special episode of Pehchaan. One of the most remarkable things about Zohran Mamdani's campaign was how he made a million Muslims in New York feel seen. Prior to Zohran's campaign, it felt like Muslim voters were invisible. And then suddenly they became a political force to be reckoned with and rewrote the political map for New York City, not just for a Muslim mayor running for office, but for any mayor running for office. And the man who helped Zohran build out his Muslim engagement strategy is our guest with us today. Hassaan Chaudhary was the director of Muslim engagement at for Zohran Mamdani's historic New York City mayoral campaign. And who would have thought that a boy who was born in Gujranwala, Pakistan, would go on to help elect the first Muslim mayor of New York City? So today we have a very exciting episode where we learn how Zohran showed up at all those Jumas, how he showed up in front of all the right halal carts, how he made Pakistani aunties knock on thousands of doors who were apolitical and created this political revolution, this political earthquake for Muslims in New York City. So the man behind that earthquake is our guest today, Hassaan. Thank you so much for giving us time. And I want us to start with perhaps the night of the election when the results were coming in for Zohran. Take us back in that moment. What was that like? What was happening? What emotions were racing through your veins at that time? And what did Zohran say to you and to your team, after the win? So take us there. And first of all, thank you for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bilal. Salam to everyone. Such a pleasure to be here and very excited for this conversation. You take me back to the election night. I would talk about the primary night election. I remember, throughout the day we were hopping from one polling station to another. At that point, the work had been done. It's more about making sure that the plans that we put in place, we are going well in various polling stations throughout the city. So by the time of election night, of course, your body is it's exhausted, but you are also, have been looking forward to this election night that you have been working towards for months and weeks. So I remember, taking uh, because my wife was at my in-laws, so I picked her up, after a long day, and then we drove towards this very tiny location that the campaign picked for the election night party, and it was pretty much a deliberate choice because we really wanted to make sure that every single dollar that we
Mhm.
had was going towards the GOTV, get out the
Wow.
vote effort.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we picked a very moderate, a kind of tiny
Hmm.
um, location for
Hmm.
for the occasion. Um, and as I was driving there, I think my wife pretty much asked the exact same question as to how I'm feeling about the night. Um, and I will share here what I told her that
Hmm.
exact moment. I told her I don't know, and this is coming from someone who had given
Wow.
every single
Hmm.
fiber of his being
Hmm.
to this historic campaign. But even at that point, I'm not sure about the others, but as we were heading towards the election night, I think I had like 50-50. I thought it could go either way. Um,
Wow.
and I think one thing everyone knew, I think, people in the campaign, outside of campaign, who have been following the campaign closely, that one thing is certain, that the winner will not be announced tonight.
Hmm.
This is a very close election,
Hmm.
uh, and we may have different possibilities and outcomes, but the winner, we may not know the winner tonight for sure.
Hmm. Hmm.
By the time we go back to our homes, um, little did everyone know. I
Hmm.
think when we went there, I still vividly remember the time. I think I got there around 9 o'clock, and people, it was already kind of packed.
Hmm.
I think the location, and around 10:30, all of a sudden, we see Andrew Como appearing on our big television screen.
Hmm.
and making the concession speech,
Hmm.
right? And
That was the moment. Like, what did you feel in that moment? Yeah.
that was the moment. And first of all, just everyone, I think, was in disbelief. We were in disbelief. Like, is it actually really happening? Is it a concession speech, or he just appearing? He loves to appear on
Hmm.
TV, so who knows? And I think I saw the byline and the headlines on TV, and that was the moment where we realized, okay, this is not a guessing game anymore. We did it, and up till that concession speech, everyone pretty much giving the views as to, like, what would happen. And we may not know until the next week. The ranch was voting its own tabulation, and all this chatter was happening.
Yeah.
And think I think that was the moment that, and everyone, I think, people who were close to him, definitely on the campaign, I think almost everyone started crying.
What was the shocking part for you guys? The fact that he won, the fact that he won so quickly and the results came, or the scale of his win, like the scale of the revolution? Like, what was it that took you guys by surprise?
I think pretty much everything. But I think on that night, definitely, I think nobody was expecting that it would be called. The election would be called. And to give you an idea, Zoran, we had three speeches prepared for him.
Hmm.
One was a concession speech.
Hmm.
One was too close to call,
Hmm.
which we thought, I think, that he's going to give that one. It's much more
Hmm.
likely for Zoran to give that version of the speech. And one was that, it's, yeah, we won the election, but I think, like, we didn't work too much on it, because
Hmm.
again, that we thought that may not be the likely outcome on that night.
Hmm.
And so I think, and if you, I still remember,
Hmm.
like, election was called out, like, around, I think, between 10 to 11, 10:30. And
Hmm.
it took a good an hour and a half for
Hmm.
Zorhan to appear on the stage and give his victory speech, that
I remember I was like, what's going on? Why isn't this speech ready? Like, why isn't he on already? And I guess like that's what was happening behind the scenes.
he came out very late on that night. I think it was around midnight. And I remember the Attorney General, of course, was there too. She had to, rework and rewrite her portion
Hmm.
of the speech a little. I think everyone who was supposed to give a speech that night had to go back to the whiteboard and work, rewrite it.
Wow.
And it was, yeah. And I think so that was the most astonishing part that night, that the election was called out. And I think a few days after, I think the scale and the magnitude of that victory, and if you just look at the odds that was stacked
Hmm. Hmm.
against, I mean, I'm going to talk about it later, just the sheer number of odds that was stacked against the campaign and Zoran. You put that into perspective, I think it's pretty much historic by every imagination.
Absolutely. And I want to talk about that and talk about the odds. So you talked about on election night, you thought it was 50-50, but you joined his campaign when it was 199. Like, there was 1% chance of him winning, 99% chance of him losing. And you actually helped improve his odds by looking at the Muslim community as an untapped, source of engagement. And then, the strategy that you built out. Um, I want you to talk to me about how you and Zoran approached, engaging the Muslim community, throughout this campaign. I understand that even on, Muslim issues, Zoran would come like directly to you and be like, okay, how do we sort of brainstorm this together? How do we sort of figure this out together? Walk me, and I think you joined the campaign like one day before Ramzan, if I remember correctly. And then, it was on the go. So walk me through what your first few days on the campaign were like, and how you guys built out this strategy to mobilize the Muslim community.
Sure, yeah. Um, I think I have to just give, not because I work for him,
Mm-hmm.
I think I really have to give credit to Zoran. And I tell you in what ways. I think there was a very early recognition
Mm-hmm.
and an understanding of the need to really activate, the Muslim base.
Mm-hmm.
From the launching of the campaign since the inception. And I think so when I joined, you're right, a day before Ramadan, I remember. And I had to give a notice to my previous job that, I really have to leave. I have to leave this job, and for indefinite period. But I may come back after June,
Mm-hmm.
um, just because I really wanted to maximize the whole and utilize the whole month of Ramadan. And
Mm-hmm.
during our conversations, my conversation with Zoran, had a couple of interviews with him, and I think the point that I kept hammering was that by the end of Ramadan, every single Muslim uncle and auntie and student, well, I think you do have like some good reputation among the activists and students, but every single uncle and auntie should know about you, because if you do not capitalize on this month, then forget about
Mm-hmm.
it. I think then in the next 2 months,
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to be able to gain a lot of ground. So this is our moment. This is our month.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and you're right. And I think the first few days I think were surreal, because I tried to do a lot of research in the first week as to if there has been an effective and successful template for to engage the Muslim voters on that scale. Anyone has done in the past, nationally, locally,
Mm-hmm.
and I could not find you know anything with substance.
Wow.
So it was about the biggest challenge was about implementing a plan while building one.
Mm-hmm.
It's about, again, like how to capitalize on Ramadan, and while you're building out a plan as to, okay, where I should take him,
Mm-hmm.
how we can, um, yeah, again, what are the hotspots throughout the city where our engagement with the Muslim voters can be most effective. Um, so that was the biggest challenge at the beginning. But then, in Ramadan, it's not just about the Fridays, the Jumas, right? It's about the iftars
Mm-hmm.
every single day. So I mapped out a plan very quickly. And I told him before Ramadan, he was going to, like, how I would define it, I think smaller to mid-size mosque,
Mm-hmm.
community mosque, storefront mosque
Mm-hmm.
throughout the city. Uh, and I thought, well, we need to change this plan,
Mm-hmm.
because, that's not effective use of your time. And let's take you to the masajid and to the community iftars, where you can speak to hundreds of people, within a few minutes. So that's the
I love that. But how did you know, like, where the big mosques are, like how to reach out to them? Is this something like, did you have a pulse on the Muslim community in New York, or did you have to develop that pulse while you were campaigning with Zoran?
So I think I'm based in Brooklyn. So I knew about the prominent, the big, the whole network of mosque, I think, in Brooklyn, but I think citywide, you're right. I think I really had to work towards it. And I remember, reaching out to initially, even during Ramadan too, reaching out to try to find out numbers online or through someone about, of these big mosque imams. I would get on phone. A lot of times, they would not pick up the phone. On times where they would pick up my phone, they would know nothing about Zoran,
Would they be like,
just
who's
have no
Zoran?
understanding of the campaign, or who's Zoran,
Mm-hmm.
just nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
No understanding about the campaign or the candidate, about the election itself. And then, you try to convince them on phone, you have just a few minutes, and you're saying, you just give us a few minutes for him to appear on your mosque, and that's all we want, and, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times, again, people will just hung up on you, but I think that's the nature of this job, and especially
Mm-hmm.
with this campaign, we have a very Muslim candidate, and that never shied away from his identity,
Mm-hmm.
and a candidate that embrace his political identity, embrace his faith.
I just want to say that that was the most remarkable point of his, like, authenticity, like, of being able to be Muslim and not shying away from it. I remember when it was that point in the campaign and it was Ramzan, obviously, like, I didn't know what was happening behind the scenes, but I saw him at the mosque and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. Then he's showing up at iftars and I'm like, wow. And then I'm waiting for the shoe to drop. Like, I'm waiting for him to become a mainstream politician, for him to, like, then begin to hide his identity. And I'm like, now it's gonna happen. Now it's
Yeah.
gonna happen. But it doesn't happen. Like, he sticks to who he is, and he's like, I'm okay with losing, I'm okay with winning, but I'm gonna win or lose on my own terms, on my own pehchan, on my own identity. And that,
Yeah.
I think, is just like the most remarkable thing. And I think what like even non-Muslim voters like were like, okay, this guy's authentic, like whoever he is, like we can disagree with him, but we know who he is. And that was just like, so refreshing.
Yeah, I think a really good evidence of that is if you pick up the very first speech that I think that he gave at a mosque, and then you really fast forward to 11 months after
Mm-hmm.
the last Jummah of the campaign before the November election, the same exact speech, like nothing, as if nothing has changed,
Mm-hmm.
right? And oftentimes, I had a little doubt, to be very honest with you, when I joined it. I'm like, let me see if he would, if he'll be making any,
Mm-hmm.
some twitches or
Mm-hmm.
some tweaks and changes to his speech, must his
Mm-hmm.
speech, as the campaign gains momentum
Mm-hmm.
and impetus. But no, he would go
Wow.
there, and I think this is a good learning for me too, and this is a very good learning curve. I think for learning a lesson for, I think for Muslims who wish to run for public office, is
Mm-hmm.
that there was no there was no condensation, I think, towards our own community.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes I think we make a lot of these speculations as to,
Mm-hmm.
like, if they voted for a different
Mm-hmm.
party, or a
Mm-hmm.
candidate that are totally opposite to our values.
Mm-hmm.
There's a temptation to not engage with them,
Mm-hmm.
and to make a lot of speculations about their
Mm-hmm.
politics. But I think the kind of politics that Zoran really practiced was that, we're gonna go to these masajids,
Mm-hmm.
and we're never gonna blame them for the voting preference, for the voting preferences of the past,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and in fact just welcome them.
Yeah.
This is a campaign where I think affordability was a huge
Yeah.
issue, and we pretty much campaign on it throughout the time, and we know that this affordability issue also affects and afflicts
Mm-hmm.
the Muslim voters too, who are part of the city. um, so we're gonna just run on that,
Yeah.
and we're not gonna shame these people. We're not gonna embarrass them for their politics or for who they voted in the past. And I think that was really key. Yeah.
No, I agree completely. In fact, I think that's one of the most like remarkable things. I remember I saw this BBC report on the Trump Mamdani voter, so the voter who voted for Trump and for
Yeah.
Mamdani. For some reason, all of them happened to be Pakistani Americans, which was hilarious. But I was like,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
sort of happening here? And that's one of the things that I think was Mamdani's advantage. That because he wasn't a traditional politician, he didn't see things traditionally. Like if people were like, oh, a Democrat would have been like, okay, I can't touch a Trump voter; they'll never vote for me. But because he was an outsider, because he was an immigrant, because he was a Muslim, he could see through like artificial boundaries and see the human for who they were, and that like resulted in a completely different sort of ball game. I want to come back to you now as the human. So you are doing all of this, like you're getting him in all the right jummas, you're getting him in all the right places. What kind of human toll is this taking on you? So I understand you had a young baby at that point in time. You had a wife, you were working 24/7. Like take me into what your life was like in that moment, and where your energy was coming from in that moment.
Yeah. That's a good question. I think I really, really have to give credit to my wife. I think uh, when I joined the campaign, you know, our son was, I think, 6 months old,
Wow.
and I've worked in many campaigns before in the past, but not again on the scale of this one. So I was going into the campaign with some understanding. I know like what it would require of me, and what kind of a personal and mental and physical toll it would take eventually. But it completely even surpassed my my expectations too, in terms of what it actually required, this whole effort. Um, so I think for her it was a lot. It took a lot of toll on my wife too. So there are a lot of personal, I think, sacrifices that we had to make. a lot of times, I would just be outside from early morning to late at night. So pretty much not really spending any time with with my newborn.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Not any time with my family. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
we understood that there is an expiration date.
Mm-hmm.
Of
Mm-hmm.
course, after June, it's ending on
Mm-hmm.
the primary date, and after time, we're gonna reconnect, and I'm gonna spend a lot more time with my
Mm-hmm.
family.
Yeah.
But I think as the campaign again, as the coalition and got bigger and bigger, the tent got bigger, the campaign was making waves. It was gaining momentum. And, that meant a lot of people, were just trying to
Yeah.
contact me, and I had to maintain relationships with now a growing number of the gatekeepers, the
Mm-hmm.
grassroots groups, and with imams and with all of the Muslim stakeholders. So that just it consuming a
Yeah.
lot more time, and think at one I think the silver lining is that I got to actually know a lot more Muslim cafes in the city, and and there are a lot more are popping up.
Mm-hmm.
So one night I would be in Astoria and just spend all the evening there, and the other time I would be in the Bronx, and some other night in Brooklyn. So that was I got to
Yeah.
really see the city. I
Mm-hmm.
think, having lived there for like 17 years, I don't think I have been. There was even some parts of the city that I had not even been to after 17 years, and I think this through this campaign, I think I got to see them. But I think it definitely,
That's really interesting.
yeah.
And clearly, you scored some great points with your wife when she watches this. But the one part that I want to understand is, what was the physical and mental toll on you personally of the work itself? Like, was there a moment when you're like, you know what, I can't do this anymore, like I give up? Or was there a moment where like just the energy of the campaign kept you going? Or, they talk about how like a mission motivates you, and I'm like, does it help you when you have long nights? Like, tell me about what your inner monologue was like when you had to push yourself through.
That's right. I think I would be disingenuous if I say that there will not be moments throughout the campaign where I did not contemplate very strongly to leave,
Mm-hmm.
really. And that's when you're thinking about quitting,
Mm-hmm.
an endeavor and of that nature. um, that means it's pretty, that things have come to a point
Mm-hmm.
where it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
compelling you to consider that. And there were quite a few moments, yeah. And every time I would talk to my wife, she would say, "What's the point of quitting at this moment? Really,
Mm-hmm.
you are among the fortunate ones
Mm-hmm.
to see this everything unfolding
Mm-hmm.
in real life, and you have this front row
Yeah.
seat, right?
Yeah.
You are really you are redefining what it means to engage with Muslims citywide.
Yeah.
I mean, you really have that responsibility. You are spearheading that effort.
Yeah.
And right now, it may seem very overwhelming, of
Mhm.
course, in the midst of it.
Mhm.
People just kind of, even when you tell them, they don't kind of care about your boundaries. So they will
Mhm.
call me at midnight, or I would get calls at 3 in the morning about the most like,
Yeah.
non-serious things from
Mhm.
an uncle who's upset that Zoran did not come to their masjid. So, so of course there are no boundaries here in this
Mhm.
work. But every time I think I would contemplate even, leaving the campaign, I think my wife would remind me like how really fortunate I am in this position.
And
Yeah.
what would Zoran say to you and the team, like privately? Because I'm assuming you were not the only person on the team whose motivation was going up and down. It was a hard campaign for everybody. What would Zoran do to sort of rally the troops, like to talk to you personally, or to tell you like why the Muslim community or this role is important? Like, tell me a little bit about your interaction, and also at a personal level, like you knew him before he became famous, and then you saw him like when he became the candidate, and suddenly I'm sure he had a security detail. And like, how did your relationship with him change over time as well? Tell me about that.
Initially, I think when I joined the campaign, he's a very, I think a very personable
Mm-hmm.
person. Like, he has a personality of that. Even back then, he was an assembly member again, twice elected. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
like, a complete outsider,
Mm-hmm.
um, from the system. Um, but we would have these one-on-one meetings throughout the primary campaign,
Mm-hmm.
where I would update him about the about the ongoing efforts and the upcoming plans and the pending
Mhm.
plans. And I think he has this tendency to really appreciate your work
Mhm.
and kind of also just pushing you at the same time. And it
Mhm.
did- you know and it didn't come across as someone who is again ungrateful of your work.
Mhm.
Um, the thing he would say to me all the time is, I think whatever I'm doing is necessary,
Mhm.
but I think what I want you to do is something extraordinary. And
Mm.
I think there's a difference between the
Wow.
two. I
Mhm.
think mindset,
Mhm.
and of course, with very limited resources, being the only person,
Mhm.
leading the Muslim engagement. And you have one more colleague too, but we're talking about a city of where, by unofficial count, you have over a million Muslims living in
Mhm.
the city. And there is always, uh, he was always push you.
Mhm.
He will always push you in a way that there's so much work that we can do, and there's
Mhm.
so much work that needs to be done to truly make this an unprecedented, historic,
Yeah.
campaign. So yeah, I got to learn about that mindset from him. That whatever you do, there's always something there's always something more you can do.
Wow. That part is really blowing my mind because I never, heard like that part. Like, of course, you can't do what Zoran did without having a mindset like that. But that's incredible. And like, I'm assuming like he would also push himself like to do that because he was not just saying that to you. He was saying it to like everybody on his team to be like, push yourself, do something extraordinary. It's almost like inhuman at all. Like, how did he do it? Like, how did he survive um, pushing himself like this much? Like, what was that like? And what do you think was like, energizing him to be able to do all of that?
I think that's true. I think oftentimes I've been quite baffled by his work ethic too.
Hmm.
And I think sometimes just does give you, well, I think when you think that you have no gas in you anymore, or that you are doing everything to possibly
Hmm.
uh, imaginable, then you look at his work ethic, and I think he would just from the I had access to his calendar like in
Hmm.
the primary, and I just could not believe that his day would start at 6 in the morning and end at like midnight. And I think around that time, what people don't know, a lot of people don't know, is that because he was the assembly member, like he also was traveling to Albany. And
Hmm.
to New York to Albany, I think by train is maybe 2 or 3 hours. But
Hmm.
every week, every Monday, like he would travel to Albany and attend sessions and come back to the city on like Thursday or Friday. So a lot of times he would just have the weekend to campaign.
Wow.
So if you put even that, if you put that into context against running against someone who is not just the former governor, who's the
Hmm.
son of a
Hmm.
former governor.
Hmm.
I mean, you're talking about the institutional advantages and the kind of name recognition that one can dream of.
Yeah, I compared him. I remember I compared him to like Bilawal Bhutto losing a Karachi mayor election, or Maryam Nawaz losing a mayor election in Lahore. Like that was like the intensity of for our Pakistani audience to be able to understand it. I have one more question on
Yeah.
this Zoran piece before I move into the political landscape again. But one of the things that I find remarkable about him is like you're telling me he woke up at 6 a.m. He was on it. He was traveling to Albany. The thing that I find remarkable is he's always smiling and always on message. Like you will never see him like with a sweat on his forehead. um it's almost unbelievable. Like I'm just like, who does that? Like how do you do that? And you're saying that he has the work ethic. Was he like that privately as well? Like was he like smiling and always in control, or like did he show his vulnerable side to his team and be like, what, like, and use that to motivate his team? Like like how did he do that? Like how was he always perfect all the time? Like what was going on behind the scenes?
I think again in behind the scenes, even like in our one-on-one conversations, team conversations, staff meetings, he I think he just by natural he's a very funny guy. Right. So that's I think even people who know to him or know to people who close to him for a long time, like they would agree that he's naturally a very funny guy. So I think that
Hmm.
just helps when you have
Hmm.
when you're working for some for that
Hmm.
personality. And of course, they were. ample, serious conversations during the course of the campaign. Um, but but I think you always feel that you can be unfiltered.
Mm-hmm.
You can speak your mind,
Mm-hmm.
and you can be unvarnished in
Mm-hmm.
your opinions about the campaign, and that would be taken seriously,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that element, I think that part of it, I think is something that I appreciated a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That in, in our conversations with about the trajectory of the campaign and what we can do more
Mm-hmm.
to engage the Muslim community, and just talk about the Muslim politics in general. They were just very candid, frank, and I think very unfiltered conversations. Yeah.
That's amazing. I now want to come back to your political impact. So, and when we met a few weeks ago, like this is the part that I get most fascinated by about your story. What inspires me is not that you did it for Zoran, which is inspiring in and of itself, but the fact that you rewrote the political map of New York City forever, regardless of whether it's a Muslim mayor running or it is, anybody who's running for mayor in New York City now has to study your playbook for how to engage with Muslim voters in New York City. What do you think that playbook is, and what advice do you have for a Muslim running for any office in the country, and also for anybody running for office in New York City, and how they need to engage with Muslim New Yorkers? Like, tell me your secrets.
I think I would, and this is something that I think that I put it together as I was working on the campaign, so I really didn't get too much time to think about it, to put together a plan. Again, I think coming back to the point of executing a plan while building one. So this is what I learned really, throughout the course of the campaign that I think worked for us, of course. Um, Oftentimes, I think people think they are just a few conventional ways to meet with people, to earn their support, or to win them over.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think we experimented with quite a few different options, and um, that I feel are replicable here or in different parts of the country as well. Of course, I think we capitalized on this huge network of mosque, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that was something that's a given, that the Muslim congregate, of course, on Fridays, and I understood that that we can speak to, or we can deliver and take our message
Mm-hmm.
to a large number of people on Fridays. So really tapping into this network is really key. um, so we did that. There are also, I think, a lot of nascent, developing, emerging Muslim political groups
Mm-hmm.
across the city. Zoran himself, I think, fun
Mm-hmm.
fact, was a member of this political group called the Muslim Democratic Club of New York,
Mm-hmm.
MDCNY, and he was a board member, I think, back in the I think assembly member time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of his close Muslim aides that he got to know, that are now working with him in the
Mm-hmm.
admin.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're developed the relationships through the club, and I think also he did mention in a couple of times in interviews that really provided him a lot of good political education.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when he was a member of that club. So, and all these different political clubs, drum beats, I really have to give them a shout out.
Mm-hmm.
All the Pakistani aunties and uncles that you have seen in different videos,
Mm-hmm.
canvassing, door knocking,
Mm-hmm.
distributing flyers to all, to South Asian neighborhoods,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of them are member of drum beats,
Mm-hmm.
and they do like outstanding, really daunting, grueling work on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So, all of these, again, the political groups have these memberships. They may not be like as deep or as comprehensive as DSA or other, groups, but they have. And I think one byproduct of
Yeah.
of Zoran's victory, I would say, is that it has given these groups a lot of, I think, legitimacy, a lot of credibility, a lot of media attention and
Mm-hmm.
traction. and now all of them, kind of see a good growth in their
Mhm.
membership. Back then, last year, really kind of, they were not in the limelight.
Yeah.
So we tap into these groups, and I was just kind of surprised to know that nobody did that. A
Yeah.
lot of the campaigns,
Mhm.
my biggest pet peeve is that they lump all of the various Asian communities, they lump
Yeah.
them together and call
Mhm.
them like an Asian American
Yeah.
outreach, which
Mhm.
is, it's couldn't be further from the truth. Um, and I think our campaign realized, and Suran, again being a South Asian himself,
Mhm.
I said, no, these are so many different communities that have different interests,
Mhm.
that work differently, they
Yeah.
have different way of communication, and these nuances, like understanding of these nuances, I think was so key.
I remember when he did the language videos, like it was in Urdu and Hindi and like Mango Lassi and Bollywood songs, and he just knew what to say to who, and I guess what you're saying is like so much of it was just about showing up. Like it wasn't about doing something crazy. It was just about being there and seeing the person. Like so much of that is what retail politics is, and that's fascinating to hear. Did you, when you were in the midst of it, uh, get any like national Muslim, political players reach out to you for either helping you or like getting your advice? Like I'm thinking about like the Walid Shahids of the world, or Faiz Shakir. Like did other Muslim like leaders come to you and be like, hey, think about this, think about that, or tell me a little bit about what kind of like conversation you had nationally, if any.
Yeah, that's right. And I think just to continue your previous point,
Mm-hmm.
because that is so key to mention,
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times, of course, there was a message discipline on our end, and this
Mm-hmm.
unrelenting focus on the messaging and policy or affordability politics. But I think in so many spaces where we got to meet with Muslim voters and our South Asian and Arab voters, I think just I think just because
Mm-hmm.
Zoran met them like in person, and came to the neighborhood, that all it mattered to them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It really, they felt seen. I
Mm-hmm.
think for the first time in a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes what it takes really,
Mm-hmm.
it's not too complicated. Just giving
Mhm,
respect to people and meet them where they are, instead of again just kind of making assumptions about them. Um, and talking about the national, I think after the primary, I would say, again, until the primary, I think there were a lot of skepticism
mhm,
locally and nationally whether he can pull this
mhm,
off. I think people
mhm,
were not like, I think, enthusiastically supporting,
mhm,
extending the support
mhm,
to Zoran nationally. They were, I think, a local group of, they were Muslim donors,
mhm,
that I think we were able to tap into. But after the primary, I can tell is it's a whole different story.
mhm, mhm,
And we started getting calls from California, from Texas, from
mhm,
um, all these Muslim donors with big pockets, and were understandably, I think, just extremely animated and excited about the game and about Zoran, and just willing to write a blank check for
mhm,
him.
mhm.
And I think I think that the support, I think, just ballooned. I think
Yeah,
after the primary,
after the
and
primary.
of course, they know that they're living
Mhm,
outside, they cannot vote.
mhm,
But we kept asking them if they have family members in New York City, they
mhm.
should encourage them to vote.
Yeah,
But if you're not here, we still need your,
yeah,
we're not taking any super PAC money, so we still like, yeah,
yeah.
can get the financial support.
And I wanna talk about that for a quick second. So obviously, after he won the primary, it became easy. But before he won the primary, and in his early
Yeah.
days, when you would go to Muslim donors, what kind of reaction would you get, and what's the story that you would pitch to them to say, "Hey, support Zoran"? Like, what was the story, and did it move Muslim donor hearts? Because there's a traditional idea that Muslim voters or even Pakistani American sort of successful people here will send money back to
Yeah.
Pakistan for schools and hospitals. but they won't donate money for change here. So talk to me a little bit about that.
I think one, that's a good question. I think, again, there wasn't a big network of, I think, Muslim donors during that primary. And I really felt the most critical time of the campaign was the primary.
Mm-hmm.
Had he lost the primary, I mean, the game is over,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like he
Mm-hmm.
would not have been the mayor, he would not have been the talk of the town
Mm-hmm.
throughout the globe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think during the primary, I came to realize, which I did not know at the start of the campaign or when I joined, but I think I realized that I think his advocacy
Mm-hmm.
on Palestine, I think,
Mm-hmm.
was really
Mm-hmm.
the common denominator
Mm-hmm.
among the Muslim donors,
Mm-hmm.
whether they are
Mm-hmm.
Pakistani or
Yeah.
or Bengali or Arab or
Mm-hmm.
it united really all of the Muslim donors to really
Mm-hmm.
pitch whatever
Mm-hmm.
pitch whatever they could. Um, and I think he cultivated this, of course, his reputation,
Mm-hmm.
well before he
Mm-hmm.
decided to run for the mayor. Uh, I remember him calling for the ceasefire really
Mm-hmm.
2 months,
Mm-hmm.
after
Mm-hmm.
the October 7th, which I, with an extremely, if you have lived through it here, it was an
Yeah.
extremely politically unpopular time to
Mm-hmm.
advocate for a ceasefire back
Mm-hmm.
then.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think like he really earned that reputation
Yeah.
among the activists, I would say, the Muslim activists or the pro-Palestine base,
Mm-hmm.
and among the Muslim donors. And
Yeah.
you know, I read like a lot of articles, not one and two, quite a few of them, where the Muslim donors were quoted as
Mm-hmm.
to Palestine is the only reason why I'm donating it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know I'm living in California. I know I'm living far away from New York,
Mm-hmm.
but I just want to help this guy because of his
Yeah.
just principled advocacy for on Palestine. And I
That.
think
Yeah.
that is, yeah. I want people who watching this
Mm.
podcast to, to have this major takeaway,
Yeah.
that if you stuck on your principles, I think it can give you a lot of dividends. Yeah.
Absolutely. And one of the things that's amazing though is like until he won the election, he didn't know that it would pay dividends. And so the question that
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have is like, I'm sure when you went from the primary to the general, like most candidates try to come back to the center, he stuck to his principles. Was there a lot of pressure on him and on you to be like, okay, the Muslims are great for the primary, but you need to tone this down and focus on the general. Like what was that tension like in the moment?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think after the primary, of course, he's a Democratic candidate for the mayor. So naturally, I think just, there were more cameras and more media following
Mm-hmm.
him, and he would, of course, like I think we became a lot more, I wouldn't say or conservative, but a little more careful and
Mm-hmm.
thoughtful in
Mm-hmm.
what we say now,
Mm-hmm.
on the media, or what he would say during the interviews. Maybe a lot more preparation
Mm-hmm.
before every, media interview, every media appearance. Um, but I think on the question of Palestine, there was of course, the genocide was unfolding,
Mm-hmm.
as and it was intensifying, you know, during the course. And of course, I think there was expectations, yes, I think from a lot of supporters to be as vocal about it.
Mm-hmm.
and and I think I understood that,
Mm-hmm.
and I understood where they were coming from. um and I think throughout the campaign, I think we did
Mm-hmm.
make multiple efforts and
Mm-hmm.
attempts
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that he kept highlighting, his I think his advocacy on the issue, and that's that we're not like wavering away from it. Um, but I felt like I think it was like interpreted in a different ways, um,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and again, I think that was a challenge. I wouldn't lie. Yeah,
Yeah.
just to how we can present this issue in a way that it it did not become a distraction,
Mm-hmm.
but also kind of showcases our disposition on this issue.
Yeah.
Um, and I tried like a few times during the campaign, for
Mhm.
to set up the, of course, set up the meetings with Palestinian New Yorkers,
Mhm.
of course, who are, the residents of this
Mhm.
city,
Mhm.
and whose families were impacted
Mhm.
directly
Mhm.
by the genocide. So he did speak to them a few times, but yeah, it was pretty much a seesaw situation, I think, especially after the primary.
Absolutely. That's fascinating. As we come to our last few minutes, I want to anchor back on your story and ask, did you ever, you grew up in Pakistan, you were born in Gujranwala. Did you ever in your wildest imagination think that you would grow up to help elect the first mayor of New York City? Like, what did your parents think? What did your family back home in Pakistan think? Like tell me like what this was like at a personal level for you and what this means.
I think my parents had a lot of had a lot of doubts. I think when I joined the campaign, I think understandably because I'm the only one in my family, I think, who has pursued, I think, this line of
Mhm.
work professionally. My sister is an oncologist. My brother is a pharmacist.
Mhm.
Um, and so I'm in this field. And my mother,
You're
from
the
the very
black sheep.
beginning, I think,
Yes.
and the black sheep, kind of the rebel in the family. But uh, I was the only one who took this very unconventional, I think, approach to a career. And it took me a lot of time. So I understood where their reservations were coming from. I think when I joined the campaign, I remember my mother called me
Mhm.
like, what are you even talking about joining another campaign? You had a stable life
Mhm.
and a stable career, and don't tell me that you're pivoting away from that
Mhm.
focus. Um, and So I think it's difficult to convince them, why I felt it was worth it. Um, and I think let the time pass, and hopefully after the primary they will know, what I will be vindicated.
And were they? What did they say? What did they say after Zoran won? Like, how did they change their opinion? Like, what did they say after he won?
But why didn't you invite him to our house for a dinner? I'm like, you are the one who was
They
questioning my
changed
choice to join
180.
the.
Desi parent for the win.
Now he is a household name, and I'm sorry, he's giving interviews to CNN, and
Hmm.
he has no time to
Yeah.
come over.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
that's like the yeah. I think it just took me a lot of time, to establish a name and to find stability, in this line of work. So um, I again, I think I understood what.
Were you always a political junkie? Like, were you always like interested in politics as a kid? Where did that come from?
Not as a kid, I think. I wasn't good in math, I remember, and I came here, I think, doing like pre and O levels from Pakistan at the age of 15. And that's like a very like an interesting age. I think
Hmm.
those who have migrated to this country around that age will definitely know what I'm saying.
Hmm. Hmm.
I don't, and no disrespect to people who were born here or to
Hmm.
Pakistanis or South Asians who are born
Hmm.
here, but I'm telling you,
Hmm.
it's a different challenge, I
Yeah.
think, when you came here around that age. Um, so, we went to like Richmond Hill High School in Queens. Shout out to them. Spent a couple of years there. It was funny that they never really kind of accepted my O level grades, and they asked me to begin from the ninth grade from the
Hmm.
beginning, and I was like, nope, that's not happening. So I went to CUNY Baruch, and I studied accounting for a couple of years, and then made a complete pivot. I think the Arab Spring
Hmm.
was, it was unfolding around that time, and I was reading about it, and I had my political science as the minor
Hmm.
because I'm not sure if it's still the same policy at Baruch or CUNY, but I think if you have a business major, you cannot have a business minor, which I,
Hmm.
I thought was a really good
Hmm.
academic policy. So I had to pick political science just
Hmm.
it was more of accidental choice. Um, and yeah, so I think as I was reading about this, Arab uprising
Hmm.
um, and all these phenomena, I think, yeah, I just got pulled in,
Wow.
by politics. And I think it took a long time to find footing or to establish a footing, I think, in this line of work.
That's amazing. I think for my last question, I want to ask you two things. One, like, what does your future look like? Like, you're so incredibly talented and you've blazed such a trail for, you know, Muslim political muscle to be exercised, wherever that is, sort of nationally within the city. You could do like anything you want to, frankly, to be able to, change the political landscape of this country and this city. Like, what do you want to do in the future yourself? And then, is there anything else about the experience with Zoran, with the campaign, or even in your own life as you reflect back on how far you've come, that you'd like to share with the audience that we didn't get a chance to go to? So I want to ask you this sort of two-parter as we come to the end.
Right now, working, of course, at the mayor office. This would not have happened had we not won. So, and again, I had different plans about my career, like maybe a year and a half ago, and it's one thing I've learned is you never know how quickly your life can change.
Mm-hmm.
In this line of field. Um, so yeah, it's a huge. I think it's a time to deliver. I think as Zoran says every time,
Mm-hmm.
on TV, like the kind of groups and the constituency I think that we were able to activate
Mm-hmm.
and brought in
Mm-hmm.
to the campaign,
Mm-hmm.
it, they were either disengaged or they were
Mm-hmm.
non-voters,
Mm-hmm.
right? So a lot of times I think campaigns it's very conventional. They
Mm-hmm.
focus on what in a campaign terminology we call the triple prime voters, those
Mm-hmm.
set of voters who have voted in the last three primary election. And that's we're not talking about any South Asian voter or
Mm-hmm.
any,
Mm-hmm.
the Muslim voter or Pakistani auntie here. We're talking
Mm-hmm.
about again just a very small group of voters who
Mm-hmm.
are very politically active and they vote in the primary. So I think when you look at these numbers, these just amazing numbers at how to what extent we were able to activate the Muslim base
Mm-hmm.
last year.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was around 300% increase among the American Pakistani voters in Brooklyn. There's a
Mm-hmm.
little strip we call the Little Pakistan in
Mm-hmm.
Brooklyn. So there was a 300% increase in voter turnout. And overall, citywide, there was a 60% increase in Muslim voter turnout in the primary.
Wow.
When these are the kind of numbers that, just you do
Mm-hmm.
not see.
Mm-hmm.
These are very,
Mm-hmm.
very abnormal numbers. You don't see them every election. So I think, there is a lot of, and having spoken with so many
Mm-hmm.
of our uncles and aunties, and students citywide, there's a lot of hope I think that they have
Mm-hmm.
placed in us to deliver the material needs
Mm-hmm.
of these people. So I think there is a focus on that right now, and I'm quite excited about that. In the future, who knows? They have a lot of campaigns that reach out to me, of course, to work on the Muslim outreach, and I think kind of tell them that it's really matters that who I work for. You gotta
Mm-hmm.
be authentic.
Yeah.
The thing about Zoran, again, I go back, is that you
Mm-hmm.
have this candidate. Forget about Zoran. They have
Mm-hmm.
this candidate who just very authentic to you, who
Mm-hmm.
come across who just don't come across as someone who is condescending to you or
Mm-hmm.
who's lecturing you
Yeah.
or you know um,
Mm-hmm.
someone who's very respectful of your time and yeah. So these qualities do matter
Mm-hmm.
in politics. I think we live in a different era now.
Mm-hmm.
Authenticity matters the most. It's the currency that is the most valuable. People may forgive you on your policy platform, but I think if you're not authentic and if you're not, not genuine in your
Mm-hmm.
convictions, I think, it's hard to win over. So yeah, I think there is a proven template, I think,
Yeah.
to really bring these Muslim voters into the elections, and yeah, I think my hope is that that we continue to participate, and there's a whole new political force now to be reckoned with. There is an understanding, there is definitely a recognition that to win a citywide election, you have to go through these constituencies, and it's a sea
Hmm.
change, right? And
Yeah.
we're talking about a really a sea change here. Um, so yeah, it's encouraging to see, but I just hope that we continue to flex our this newfound electoral muscle. Yeah.
Absolutely. I loved everything about our entire conversation, except when you talked about your future. You talked, inspired by Zoran. I could see sort of the inspiration over there. But I do want to say one thing that I, love about you and what you've accomplished is you have um, suddenly made something that was invisible visible, like the muslim voter, the muslim candidate, the fact that we have political power, even on an issue like Palestine, like that the court of public opinion has changed. I think that that is such a meaningful contribution, not just to Muslim Americans, but to American society and American political theater, like in terms of like advancing a candidate like this, a cause like this, in a moment like this. Um, and I think, like, on behalf of the community, I think that you have to use your talent and your skill to expand the circle of who can benefit from here. So I understand what you're saying. You want to work with candidates who are authentic, who are real, but you either need to write a book or come on a podcast, which is why we did this, or find a way to communicate and help both locally and at a national level how people can learn from your playbook and engage the Muslim community, because this was really remarkable. And I feel like they say news is the first draft of history. So I feel like we've just
Yeah.
heard and read the first draft of your story, but when the full reach of this political revolution is understood, it will change what American politics and, frankly, global politics looks like for generations to come. So, thank you for your service and for everything that you did, and I hope that you continue this service and not shy away from from taking on bigger and bigger sort of challenges in front.
Thank you, Bilal. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Really. Again, we just have scratching the surface here. I think that a lot more that
And I'm going to have you back. We need to continue this conversation, and we need to do it in more and more forums. So I'll definitely be
yeah,
inviting you to any events I'm going to, and wherever I can poke you for more conversations and more insight, and as a guest on our podcast as well. So this is the beginning of a new friendship and a relationship. So inshallah, may our
perfect. Yeah.
community get blessed by it. All right, thank you so much, Hassan.
Thank you. Thank you, Bilal. Take care.